Hey, folks. Zach Osterman here. IU Insider, Indianapolis Star. We are live. Well, we're live if you're here, Mike.
Yes.
We didn't stream this one. You have to come find us at Homefield at Tracks on Kirkwood Avenue in downtown Bloomington. If you are in Bloomington for any reason at all, get here. They have an unreal selection of IU apparel, even just some general college apparel. They are in keeping with the long-standing soul of this place, still selling records in the back. In fact, possibly more records than Tracks actually sold when I was in school. So first and foremost, thank you so much to Homefield for having us out. We've been working to set this up for a few weeks, Mike, and now we're here.
Yeah, you should mention we're donning some.
We are. Well, I'm wearing the Homefield hat. I'm wearing the Homefield hat, too.
You doubled up.
I did.
I did
but I'm going to have to take it off in a minute because I'm sweating.
Celebrating my Chicago roots. I was going back to Joey Meyer's time. This was before they were in the conference. Do you know Tom Kleinschmidt?
I know the name.
Yeah, he would have flourished in a Darren DeVries offense. Three-point shooter at the end of his career, 6'5" guard. Grew up watching him at the All-State Arena before it was the All-State Arena.
Over in Rosemont.
Yes.
In fact, my hotel at Big Ten Media Days was
were
right
there,
next to the All-State Arena.
Next to your favorite restaurant.
I was actually staying at the All-State Arena.
Got a deal. Next to your favorite restaurant.
I'm just wearing one that says "Don't tweet at Croots" because you should never tweet at Croots. I think that's a good general rule.
That's a fair rule.
Yeah. Transfers. You know, they are older.
There's an age limit to your.
I think maybe the rule is just don't tweet.
Put an asterisk on it.
Just don't tweet.
Don't tweet.
That might just be the better message. Just don't tweet. We got a lot of ground to cover today, so we should dive right in. Let's talk about basketball first. We're going to talk, obviously, probably more about football, but I'm guessing a lot of people weren't able to watch the exhibition game on, Saturday night, Friday night. The days do start to blend together this time of year because it was on Big Ten Plus, and because people have things to do on Friday night other than watch exhibition basketball. I know the number one takeaway that people have talked to me about is the obvious one, 15 of 30 from behind the three-point line. I don't expect Indiana to make 15 threes a game. I don't expect Indiana to shoot 30 threes a game. But I think for this fan base, every night like that for at least the first couple months of the season where the shots that are supposed to fall, that the offense creates, that we are told, that they are told these players make in practice, every night they see those shots fall, I think they're going to feel a little bit better about the direction of the program because, quite frankly, that has just been a 50-pound ankle weight on this team for the last 7-8 years at least.
Well, and 6 different players made a three-pointer. 10 different players attempted. DeVries talked at Big Ten Media Day about kind of giving everybody a green light, and I think you've seen that in practice now. You saw it in Puerto Rico. We saw it in the exhibition game, and they've got just the depth of shooters that's just different. It's not even just the volume. It's that this isn't all just one guy. It's not all Lamar Wilkerson. It's not all Tucker. It's this whole lineup. From top to bottom, you can just see the breadth of their talent, and their shooting is really impressive, and I think it's going to be challenging because I think there's going to be ups and downs to that. Those teams tend to be a little more streaky because when you're off, it can be a struggle. But I think you've seen the firepower this team does have.
I think the other encouraging thing to me was it didn't feel like – what's the best way to put this? It did not feel as though you mentioned how many different players attempted and made a three. It also felt to me like guys were comfortable shooting anywhere. That it wasn't just like, well, he only takes threes in the corner or he only takes threes in transition. Or, like Indiana got that way a little bit in Mike Woodson's second season with Trace Jackson Davis. They had some guys that were defined three-point, among other things, defined in their offensive role, shooting the three, Miller Kopp, Tamar Bates. And some of this was also just because the offense was so structured around Jackson Davis and around the idea of, sort of posting the ball up and then spreading everything out from there. But even then, even when Indiana was a decent shooting team, not in high volume, but at least percentages-wise, they shot the three well enough, I would say, that season. You felt like you knew what three-point attempts had to look like. Whereas, and we saw this in Puerto Rico, and I think we saw it maybe even more in that Marian game, the guys were just naturally, instinctively floating to space, and it really didn't matter where it was. There was a moment, I think it was in transition, where Tucker DeVries brought the ball, kind of left center at an angle from outside the 3-point line, off the dribble. And Tate Conaway was ahead of him. And instead of just clearing out and giving DeVries the lane, Conaway sprinted to the corner and set up. And I don't think Tate Conaway is planning to shoot a ton of corner threes this year. He's point guard, right? Like, he's going to be the one initiating the action a lot more often, at least in theory. But in that moment, instead of just saying, I'm going to get out of his way, I'm going to let, the leading scorer go for the rim, he's hunting a shot. And he's hunting a shot that's probably, again, not where he's going to take a lot of his threes this year when he takes them. But there's just that instinct of, I'm constantly looking for where space is on the floor. And I think when you couple that to the experience of this group and the confidence, that you talk about Tucker DeVries, a Lamar Wilkerson, whoever it might be.
Sam Alexis.
Sam Alexis, the best three-point shooter on the team, if you ask Sam Alexis. That there's just kind of this recognition of constantly understanding how to hunt the space you need for these kinds of shots. And in that play I'm talking about, Tucker DeVries basically jump stops, bounces the ball to the corner, and Tate Conaway hits a corner three.
Yeah, and I mean, you could see in terms of like what the offense looked like. I mean, the only time they went into kind of the post really was Alexis.
Yeah, it was just same in Puerto Rico. A little bit of Reed Bailey, but
that's not really part of his strength of his game, at least. And so, I mean, that's got to be shocking to the system for IU fans who basically went 4 years where that was sort of where the offense went through the bigs. It went through Malik Renew, went through Khalil Ware, and now it's sort of an afterthought. Like if that's there a couple times a game, they're going to take it, and that's part of Sam Alexis's sort of skill set. You can kind of see he has a bigger body and is comfortable there, but they don't really have a guy other than that's going to do that. It's sort of maybe the not last resort, but I mean it's just the opposite of what IU's offense has been for Mike Woodson's entire tenure. And fans, I mean, it's very clear that this is a breath of fresh air for them to see a different product than they have became used to. And
that is by design. I think we've talked about this, but I pulled out this story from Puerto Rico. Darren DeVries' last 3 seasons, 2 at Drake, 1 at obviously West Virginia. His team's ranked 223rd, 151st, and 250th nationally in post-ups as a percentage of overall possessions, compared to Indiana, which in that same stretch was 15th, 10th, and 31st.
Oh, wow.
Like this is by design, and it's. Listen, I mean, it could get overplayed sometimes. Like Indiana would post the ball up with Trace Jackson Davis. They could still score a lot of different ways. But the problem was that post-up offense left you fewer options.
Yeah.
And when bodies weren't moving as much, when the ball wasn't moving as much, it could go stagnant. Trace Jackson Davis' passing ability was what, kind of kept it going. But, once you lost that, I think Indiana really struggled to kind of find the consistent sort of impact again. The other thing, and these two things go hand in hand, the more you score the ball, the faster your opponent's going to have to play. And, of course, we caveat all of this by saying this is just an exhibition. Marian's, not the kind of competition Indiana's going to need to be ready for in January, February, March. But they were also able to make Marian play at their speed without a ton of defensive pressure. And, again, I think a lot of that is scoring the ball, frankly, because the more you score, the more the other team is going to have to speed things up and go.
But it's hard. I mean, they're not going to dictate a game. They're not going to score what the run 27, 25-point run at some point.
26 to nothing.
And then, they got up to, they led most of the game by 40 points. So, I mean, they were dictating everything until the walk-ons got on the floor. I mean, you're not going to be able to sort of do that. I think it's encouraging to see, but, I mean, I think we'll need a larger sample size. Baylor will be a better test of what you'll kind of see. But, I mean, obviously the Tennessee game, was that last year, exhibition game?
Tennessee was, yes.
Last year did not end up sort of bearing out what happened in the season. So these exhibition games can be tricky, especially against ones where, the competition, it just didn't have the same talent level. So I'm reluctant to sort of take those kind of things away from the game. Like, yes, in a perfect world, this is what it'll look like every night, but it's going to be hard to do that against a team you match up that has talent that matches up to you.
Well, sure, of course. I think that's implied to everything. That we're going to say
they're
about,
not going to be able to dictate the pace from the start to finish, I guess is my point. Like they did here.
Again, competition allowed. I thought the defense at least looked a little bit more structured. I mean, you and I saw them at that practice in July, and frankly, it was pretty rough. and Darren DeVries didn't really deny that. I mean, he said, you can tell we're further along offensively than we are defensively. And even in Puerto Rico, they deserve credit for those comebacks and some of the stretches that they defended their way through in the second halves of both of those games. But they were down by 20+ in both of those games against Mega Superbet, the team from Serbia. I thought at least the defense, it looked like the structure was a little bit more inherent within the roster here of guys understanding when to be where, when to switch, when to move, how to push the action this way or that way.
Part of that was the communication. I thought was better.
Yeah, probably.
They were very vocal. I think what's interesting is you got a guy like Tucker DeVries to lean on both ends, and I thought he was sort of the most comfortable right out of the gate and sort of set the tone, not only with his offense but his defense. I think the biggest cheers of the night came when he, at midcourt, forced those turnovers on back-to-back possessions with just hustle plays. And sort of that, I think, is going to be key for this team because I do think they have inherent disadvantages with size that are going to hurt them on the defensive end, and that extra hustle, that extra effort, that communication is going to be what sort of gets them, I think, in close games, is going to win them a few because they're going to need that. Because, like I said, I think they do have some limitations defensively that teams will be able to take advantage of. But if you counter that with hustle and making those extra, plays, turnovers and things like that, steals, that can play a difference. And you saw them locked in a way you hadn't yet, or at least I hadn't. I mean, you were in Puerto Rico. You've seen them a little more in the practices I'm talking about that we hadn't seen yet.
It is hard. I mean, I almost didn't include this in the agenda today. I wrote it on an official agenda today.
You did.
It was very, very, very professional. Less winging it. Let's just what are we going to talk about now? Trent Sisley, it is hard to ignore. And you don't want to overdo it. He's the one holdover from last season. He's the only scholarship player on roster from the state, right? And there is maybe some of that attachment between eras. But listen, every time we get a look at him, he acquits himself well. Every time we get a look at him, he doesn't look overwhelmed. In practices, he's comfortable with the athletic level of his teammates, of the players he's guarding. In games, he's not just shooting the ball well, though he is shooting it very well, but he's also rebounding it well. He's showing something on defense. I think he had 3 assists in this game. This reminded me a lot of the first game in Puerto Rico when they played Universidad de Bayamón, which was just not competitive. And in both of those games, Sisley winds up co-leading scorer against Marian. And in both those games, he winds up playing the most minutes because he's the one that's kind of bridging, at the end of the game when all the starters are out. And what strikes me as much as anything is when he is given an opportunity, and he's been given some here by some late arriving freshmen, by injuries, obviously, and Darren DeVries is going to want to be healthier. But every time Sisley gets an opportunity, he seems to rise to it. And that's really all you can ask a freshman to do. I don't think he's going to start, but it is certainly very, very difficult to imagine he is not somewhere in the rotation.
Well, I mean, he made his first 8 shots, I think.
Yes, he was 8 of 8. I believe he was at one point. I think he might have been 11 of 11 if you included the free throws.
And
10
played
of 10
27
maybe.
minutes. I view it as they would need him to play these kind of minutes right now anyway because they're short-handed.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's become the equation with him. I think you want him playing sort of these minutes now. I mean, he's clearly their first player off the bench. I think we'll see. There's going to be some ups and downs as a freshman, but I mean, he looks talented enough that he's a guy that you feel like is your 6'7" guy, 6'7", and
no kids in the audience. I think
did not land. But the
my 7-year-old was here.
Yeah, I know, they would have lost it. But no, I just think that's where he's earned himself. And you ask his teammates, and they say, "Look, this kid's ready." And I mean, I don't know if it has to do with his experience in Monteverde, Montverde. It just looks like he's ready for the moment, and that's encouraging because I think his upside is as high as anybody in the roster.
Darren DeVries said something that I one of us asked him about in Puerto Rico, and I have sort of suspected, which is that essentially it's really helped him to be on a very experienced team. That he hasn't had to be, one of several freshmen, that there's not a ton of expectation on him too soon, that he's got more experienced players to lean on. And, the moment that I thought, and I said this to somebody earlier today on a radio show I do down in southern Indiana, he had a moment in the first game against Mega where he was defending a post-up, and the mega player kind of hooked his arm from around behind and then just sort of slowly fell to the floor, trying to convince the referee that Sicily had brought him down, essentially. And the referee saw it, whistled the offensive foul on the mega player. And once Sicily realized that he had not been, the referee had spotted what had actually happened and the kid hadn't bought the foul, he bent down and barked at him. And I'm not going to share what you could hear of what he said because I think that would require us to put some disclaimers on the podcast. But that is the sign of a player who just, I think, is, you can see what he's doing in his game. You can see what he's doing in the stat sheet. But that's the sign of a player who's very confident in his game and in his own skin right now, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And he played like it on, well, I don't even know. Was it Friday the exhibition was?
Yes.
When you saw him come off the bench and he played like a long stretch. And, I think the starters took more time other than Tucker kind of to get comfortable, whereas I think Sicily was an exception. When he came off the bench, he was just ready to go, made a couple of tip-ins, just looked, free-flowing in the offense, never looked overwhelmed defensively. Just a kid that has a lot of poise that you're impressed with as a true freshman, especially on a roster that doesn't have very many of them.
The only real, not the only concern, the biggest concern right now is health. Yeah. If you're Indiana, the reason Sicily played that many minutes, the reason he was still on the floor at the end of the game Friday was because they literally didn't have anybody else to put in the game. Because, even one of their walk-ons is hurt. And I think if you're Darren DeVries, that's obviously a concern on game days. It does also make practice harder. If you don't have
he's talked about it. They can't do 5-5 as much as they'd like to because they don't have subs at that point. And so, that's a real challenge to get around, especially when you're trying to get ready for the season. And it doesn't sound like, I guess, Nick Dorn's the closest. They all have lower body injuries. Nick Dorn's the closest. He's kind of nearly back to full contact.
Dorn's, he had a Jones fracture in his foot, and it was a holdover from Elon. I believe my understanding was he had a procedure to correct it, and that procedure did not correct it, so he had to have it again.
And so he's the closest back. Maybe the season opener, maybe not entirely clear, but the other three guys might be out through into December. And so it's going to be a challenge for them, sort of balancing minutes kind of going forward, and especially against lesser opponents. If those are blowout games, you're going to have somebody kind of load up, and Sicily was, probably not going to be the one to do it every night. They're probably going to have to rotate that a little bit.
Yeah, and listen, obviously the Baylor game, you're probably playing your starters, for all 40 minutes in some rotation or other. But to your point, once you get to the Alabama A&Ms, or Alabama State, I can't remember, I don't have the schedule right in front of me, but once you get to those sort of guarantee games in the non-conference, Alabama A&M, Milwaukee, Lindenwood, et cetera, you are going to want to be able to get to a place in the last 8 minutes of those games where, all of your recognized rotation players come off the floor and stay off the floor.
Right.
So that's, I think, the biggest maybe concern out of that Marian exhibition. Do you know who else has injury concerns? Kurt Signetti.
Concern.
That's true. They're not as bad, though.
No.
Did you like that segue?
That was a great segue.
A+. That's what we do here at the Podcast Factory. I guess let's start with the news from today. Kellen Wyatt is out for, it sounds like, an extended period of time. Did Signetti say it was a knee injury?
He said knee injury.
He said knee injury, which is more specific than he normally gets. Indiana's going to see more Stephen Daly. You and I wondered if maybe Mario Landino spends a little bit more time out at end. Indiana was doing some when they got to a place where they were comfortable just rushing three a decent amount last year. James Carpenter was playing what you would probably, if you had to put a name on the position, was playing a little bit more defensive end. Now he would kick inside a lot, and then they would bring like a backer or even that rover position as almost kind of like the fourth rusher, but still. They're going to have to get a little bit creative with that. Signetti, by his own admission, really likes Stephen Daly. The Kent State transfer had, two sacks on Saturday against Michigan State, including the sack that basically kind of ended Michigan State's last real threat. Signetti said today that he wishes the football program had more time with Daly, basically that he's just really, really good, and Signetti wishes they'd had more years to kind of develop him and thread out his game. But that is a spot where, Indiana would probably be pretty comfortable not losing anyone else because Wyatt had been very impactful so far this season, and there isn't a ton of experience depth behind that top three of Kamara, Wyatt, and Daly.
Yeah, briefly on Daly. I mean, they've been rotating the three guys, Kamara, Wyatt, Daly, almost evenly. I mean, they all have over 200 snaps. He's got 210, 13 pressures, third on the team, 3 sacks. Had a really big game, like we said, against Michigan State. He's actually a Virginia kid that they were kind of recruited and had on a camp. I think Sigourney mentioned that today. Kind of blew him out of the water with his athleticism and speed. Came in a little out of shape, and then and Signetti kind of talked about now that he's in shape and knows the playbook, like the sky's the limit with this kid because of his athleticism. So they really like him. So it's good that they have that clear frontline guy to sort of step up alongside Kamara. The problem is, like you mentioned, they have basically no experience at the position behind that. Lendino, who's a sophomore, who's now playing exclusively tackle, is their most experienced guy. And he only played 80 snaps on the edge last year. So it wasn't like they have a ton. Could he move back and forth now and give them 10 to 15 reps? That might be their best option. Other than that, you're looking at guys Daniel Ndukwe, William, is it DePepe? Is that how you say it?
DePape, I believe.
DePape. And was it Quinn? Who am I thinking of?
Quentin Clark.
Quentin Clark, who moved over from linebacker.
Yeah, he's kind of like a linebacker that's been bulked up to more of
so
kind of an end.
But those guys have not played very much. Ndukwe, I'm looking right now, has played 7 snaps this year. So do you ask them to sort of come in kind of this, obviously huge moment and try to take some of those 15 to 20 reps? That's probably all you need from a third guy right now, because Kamara and Daly both have proven capable in their, on their resumes that they can handle. Daly played 540 snaps last year, 566 the year before that. So you mean they're going to up the reps, but you still need somebody to kind of spell them from time to time, and they don't really have a great option right now because of kind of their lack of experience.
I would say just about everything else from the Michigan State game was a positive for Indiana. I know they were, disappointed a little bit with the defensive performance, and I guess to a certain extent you can understand why. I wrote about this today. I think it says a lot about the level that Indiana's defense has set for itself, that you can come out of a game with 4 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, and 1 touchdown allowed, and feel like you were less than your best, feel like there was kind of a pronounced maybe drop-off from Oregon. I think, part of me is tempted to say, hey, you won the game, Michigan. You let Michigan State dictate some of the terms of the game, and you still won it by 25. Part of me is also just tempted to say, if you're trying to win, if you're trying to go 12-0, which is what Indiana is trying to do at this point, they're not all going to be, oh my God, were you there win moments. They're not all going to be Illinois, they're not all going to be Oregon, they're not all going to be Iowa, where it's like, hey, it's a grinder, but we made the play at the end. There are going to be a lot of just forgettable afternoons where 10 years from now someone says, do you remember the day? Does anyone remember the score of that game? I know we beat Michigan State that year, but does anyone remember what happened? I thought Fernando Mendoza obviously played very, very well. I thought the offense had a really good day after a couple of understandably tough performances at Iowa and at Oregon. I don't think they needed a get right day or anything like that, but I just think it probably felt good for them after a couple of really difficult sort of tests on the road to come home and just have a very comfortable afternoon, 400+ yards of offense, touchdowns on each of their first 5 drives, and so forth. But this also just did feel like just kind of another box ticked a little bit in the course of this season.
Yeah, I think it's underselling a little bit because the offense was pretty darn good. I mean, they scored 31 unanswered at one point.
That's fair.
Scored. Well, I think all their first 5 drives are over 65 yards.
Yeah, they were all not all of them were methodical. I think one only took 4 plays.
But I mean,
they all
covered the length of the field.
Yeah, the turnovers weren't.
Yeah, it wasn't like they were getting short fields and sort of pounding it in or setting up at the goal line. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't pretty at times, but I think if you take out, and Signetti kind of talked about, after those first 2 drives, sort of everything went their way. Mm-hmm. And even for the defense, you don't love that. One was the scripted drives, and you talked about kind of how those can be an outlier for teams. But they did have 2. But at the same time, I mean, man, the game, I think we talked right after, this was never in doubt after the first drive of the third quarter when Indiana came out of halftime and scored. This was not a game, right? They won handily and on to the next. Michigan State had a 10-7 lead, but man, it just never felt like they were going to threaten this team in any substantial way. And that's kind of what you got to do because, you're basically looking at sort of similar level opponents, even though Penn State was obviously supposed to be different. I just think that right now it's going to be like this for the next 5 weeks.
Well, we're going to talk about UCLA in a bit. It's disrespectful to the
2026
national champion Bruins. I don't know if this was Fernando Mendoza's best game, but you and I both talked about after Oregon that he had kind of the signature moments now.
Yeah.
That he had the touchdown pass against Iowa, that last drive in Eugene, where I think he's like 5 of 7 for 60. I had it in my story, 67 yards and a touchdown, something in that range. But it was kind of these games were where if he was going to put together a Heisman campaign, he needed to stuff some stats, and he did that. He was you've got the box score in front of you.
24-20, but as many touchdowns as incompletions, 24-28, 332 yards, ran the ball 5 times for 18 yards. Obviously a lot of that goes to Omar Cooper and Elijah Surratt, but just looked really smooth and sort of in charge of the offense. And I think that was what, if you watch this game, you sort of felt was kind of maybe the difference between he put up numbers the first 4 weeks that, exceeded this at times, but he never looked kind of as comfortable from start to finish in the pocket with his decision-making, with where he was delivering the ball.
Yeah.
Like that was, I think, the step up that, Kurt Signetty said after the game, this is the sharpest we've ever seen him. That was the difference, right?
Yeah.
Because there were times in all those games where he kind of got out of sorts a little bit, and there was a pressure, and then something happened, then he missed a couple. That didn't happen here. He was just on target from start to finish. I couldn't think of a ball that he sort of put in harm's way, which was sort of like the first time all season.
Right. He looked. It was the game, and it's worth saying he's now. His 21 touchdown passes are tied for most in the country, and the other two. Quarterbacks, Josh Hoover at TCU, at one time an Indiana commit, actually.
But didn't you love that somebody brought up his touchdown to interception ratio? And it's like, he's not, second best for me.
But he's got 21 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. The only 2 quarterbacks with 21 touchdowns are Josh Hoover and Sawyer Robertson, TCU and Baylor, respectively. They have significantly more attempts. Sawyer Robertson has almost twice as many pass attempts as Mendoza, and he now leads, according to CFB stats anyway, he now leads the nation in quarterback rating. And I think your point is that is kind of what triggered me to write about him on Saturday night, was that it felt like, number one, obviously these are the games where you fill up your numbers, so that at the end of the year you have the signature moments and you have those moments that you remember, Oregon, Iowa, coupled to, and by the way, he's top 3 in the nation, and completion percentage and touchdowns and this and that. But your point is why I kind of wound up writing about him Saturday night, which was it felt like the you don't want to say the culmination because there's a lot of season left to play, but it felt like the moment when you could tell
him progressing
his command of the offense, like you said, it wasn't even just the ball wasn't in harm's way. Like the ball was going where it felt like, watching the play develop in real time, it was supposed to go. That he was, the way he was seeing the field, pre-snap, post-snap, there was just a comfort level with this is what this route combination is going to get this player open, and that's where the ball is going. He looked as comfortable, as poised, as natural in that position as I think we've seen him this season. And if you're Indiana, that's when you hope that he goes up to that level that maybe at times we saw from Curtis Rourke last year, where he would just stack, big performances just week after week after week. And there are going to be a couple games, frankly, in here where I think Indiana might need that from him. Like I wouldn't be shocked if there's a game or two, coming up here, not unlike the Maryland game last season, where again, you want to talk about kind of forgettable games. Like I think people forget they only beat Maryland by 14. That was a tie game in the third quarter.
And Maryland did a lot of the falling apart in that game.
Yeah, there might be some games here in the next 2 or 3 weeks where Indiana needs Mendoza to keep them on track because the opponent's doing something a little bit unexpected or a little bit difficult to handle.
Yeah, but I do think it's worth mentioning, and this is a topic that I wrote about separately. The receivers, I mentioned Cooper and Surratt, what they're doing right now is pretty special. And Signetti talked about it. I went back and watched kind of the one touchdown that Cooper had where they were bunched up and then Cooper got loose over the top. Michigan State had 3 guys sort of tracking Surratt on the play, and that basically left him on one-on-one Cooper on one-on-one coverage. It speaks to what Signetti was talking about. Like, you can try to defend one, you can try to take out one guy out of a game plan, but it's pretty hard to do 2, and it's even harder to do more than that. But just Cooper elevating his game to a level, because they said he could get here, and now he's sort of arrived, and Surratt's just sort of. I forgot about, as the game went on, that move he put on his first touchdown was that juke where the guy almost fell down, like he juked him, like basically onto the ground. Their consistency is taking this offense to the next level, along with Mendoza, because they are just, like I said, I think it might be the best receiving tandem in the country. I mean, there's a couple in there when you kind of look at the numbers. A couple duos in the top 30 of kind of things nationally. They're obviously, Ohio State has one of them, but it's hard to imagine what they're doing right now. I mean, they both have a chance to have 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns in the same season, something that's only done individually twice here with the Hoosiers. And they have a shot, at basically every record for single season record. So, I mean, you've seen a lot of good receivers too. One thing that hasn't been lacking.
Well, hold on.
Okay.
Is this time for a natural time for the giveaway?
We could do a giveaway.
Do a giveaway?
What are we giving away?
We
got a Bison shirt.
Yeah.
Size large.
Size large.
Do
you want to ask the trivia question?
Well, who are those 2 receivers?
Two receivers in IU history.
IU history who had 1,000 yards and 10 or more touchdowns in the same season.
In a single season. Not the 2
them
receivers.
Together, just them. Yeah.
All right. So we asked the question. Maybe give the masses a little time.
Time to think about it.
One is probably a little bit more obvious than the other.
Did you cover either? Were you here around for?
Should we at least say what years they were?
We could.
All right. So one was 87, right?
I'm pulling them up right now.
I wasn't credentialed then.
You were not credentialed.
No, I wasn't.
Was that your first year on the beat?
That was my first year on the planet. And the other was
87 and 2007.
Yes. That's the one that might be a little bit easier for people.
If somebody got one, we could give it one.
Yeah, I think we give it one.
Give it one.
To be fair, I did not know both of them when you posed this to me.
I stumped you.
You did stump me. I think, let's be fair, I think Wikipedia stumped me. I don't think you did this research.
I did actually do this research.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so we'll throw it out there. If somebody's got an answer, just come on up and deliver it. But one way or the other.
But now you go back to the question. Best receiving duo that you've seen in covering the team, best receiving duo in the country. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, it is. See, it's hard for me to answer without giving one of the answers.
Oh, there you go.
I mean, in terms of duos, Tandon Dawson to Marlo Belcher were very good together. For a lot of Indiana's time, it's always felt like there was kind of one premier receiver rather than one and then sort of multiple talented receivers around that. So Cody Latimer with Kofi Hughes and Shane Wynn, kind of backing him up. Simi Cobbs was a really, really good receiver, but you also had Mitchell Page and Ricky Jones. I think Ricky Jones might have finished with 1,000 yards in 2015. He's not the answer, obviously, to the trivia question.
He has not one of the. He did not. There's only been 7 different receivers with 1,000 yards in program history in single season.
Well, there you go.
That was not one of them. So you're just throwing out wrong facts.
just hail warning. But especially as a duo together, yes. I think the answer is yes. And listen, I mean, it is obviously helped by the fact that you've got an NFL QB throwing to them, that this is about as efficient of an offense as we've seen at Indiana in recent memory. But it is hard to argue, especially because, when you and I had this conversation, I think on the post-game show on Saturday night, if you want to even throw E.J. Williams in there as a third, you have 3 different types of receivers too. Yeah. Surratt is so tough, so precise, so technical. So much that gets thrown his way gets caught. Cooper has the speed. He takes he sort of lifts the top off of defense at a level that again, if you want to talk about historically, Indiana's had some receivers that could do that, but maybe not quite at his level, very many of them. And then you have E.J. Williams, who is just really big-bodied. I know he doesn't get the touchdown on Saturday, but I mean that was a heck of a catch. And it was one of those, like, I don't really understand why if the toes are down, the heel has to come all the way down. Like why can you drag the toe and get the touchdown, but you can't? But if you're catching it and planting your foot down, the heel has to come down and bounce. That's why he didn't get the catch. But the point is, it's still a heck of a catch. So
well, he was the guy that's the NFL when their careers all started. Like E.J. Williams was like a top tier like pro prospect coming into college, and even after his freshman year, like he was the guy that people were looking at. It was like this is the next. Clemson had produced a lot of good receivers. Obviously, injuries kind of derailed his career, but like he's got that size and sort of body that like all scouts love, and so he's your third option. I mean, that's a pretty dangerous spot to be in for an offense when you're kind of just like you have all this in front of you. And like to be honest, like Riley Nowakowski, who we didn't think would be that much of a pass catching threat, has come through in some big spots. 11 catches, 140 yards, a touchdown this season. Haven't really had to use Holden Stays all that much.
No.
And they've sort of gotten the most out of everybody they've sort of put in there. Hemby hasn't done as much sort of in the passing game, but when they need him, when they call on him, he's kind of giving them what they needed. But it's just a really kind of good mix with, I think, Surratt and Cooper sort of leading the way.
Do you have concerns defensively about Indiana after Saturday? Whether it's maybe not getting Childs off his rhythm early, whether it's, I know they finished with 4 sacks, but let's be very fair. They weren't a lot of that pressure came home later in the game. Like they were struggling for the consistent pressure that we saw at Oregon. They were struggling for early in the game. That's a lot of the reason, obviously, why Childs has so much success. Again, like it speaks to the level that Indiana has set for itself that we're asking this question. But do you have concerns defensively?
Not particularly. I thought that Michigan State had a good game plan. I just don't think they had the talent to sort of execute it or sustain it. And I don't know, kind of going forward here, at least in the regular season, that anybody that they face will have the talent to sort of consistently beat this defense. Like I don't think we've seen it. I mean, Oregon didn't do it, and so like I'm kind of hard pressed to see, the Wisconsins and the Marylands of the world being able to do it.
Wisconsin
down bad.
Did you see the tweet this weekend about like the last 27 Wisconsin drives, and they've scored on one of them?
Well, they had a giveaway for the third quarter. If they scored any points, then people would have won. What was it, tater tots?
And the cheese curds. Maybe
they did not give away
curds.
any cheese curds.
So, it was literally like punt, interception, fumble, punt, turnover and down, like field goal. Like it was brutal. 27. I mean, because 27 drives is like 3 games.
Yeah, no, but even if that talent was raised, like I think that this is a very good team. Chris and I talked about adjustments, and they are very good at halftime adjustments. Defense, Brian Haynes, very good. Even if they get caught off guard with something, usually by the third quarter they're in a good spot. I mean, even in the losses they had, they were better in the second half against Notre Dame, Ohio State defensively. So I don't sort of worry about this team defensively. I think they've got. Up front, one more injury. Yeah, I think there's going to be some concerns because you just don't have the bodies there. And we've talked about they've got some spots on the defense. Safety in the secondary is another one where if they had an injury, like what happens? And then I think you have some concerns. But right now, the way they're playing, the scheme that they have, the way they're executing, I don't sort of had any large. This game didn't sort of cause me to have any larger concerns.
The season so far. You would have been wrong on both. That's correct.
That's correct.
Did Latimer ever have 1,000 yards? Wap had 1,000 yards.
Both had 1,000 yards.
Okay.
Latimer in 2013, Wap in 2019.
Latimer's season in 2013 was weird. Like he had a lot of big games.
Latimer got close though. He had 9 receiving touchdowns that season, so he's 1 touchdown away.
Yeah. Games. I said in the agenda here, I said seasons like this are built on games like Michigan State, where you just you win with a minimum of fuss, you move on.
You've covered a lot of seasons like this, so
I've covered. Well, the thing is, I've covered a lot of games.
He's covered a lot of 12-0
on the other side, like that.
0-12,
not the 0-12, but Indiana is the team that has the good plan that keeps it close, maybe till halftime, but then quality tells, depth tells, coaching tells.
Oh, we saw that.
And
in
you
my
just
first game
and
on
they
the
just
beat,
sort of
2023 when they had Ohio State close, but that was never really in doubt.
Right. Yes, it just kind of eased away. Yeah. The other thing with this season, and we've talked about this, but it is important to kind of keep emphasizing it as playoff resumes clarify themselves more and more. the quality they need is already in the barn. Like, Iowa's almost certainly going to be a bowl team this year. So that's a decent win on the road. Of course, Oregon is probably the best. Oregon on the road is probably the best win anyone in the country has right now. Illinois at home, especially the way you beat Illinois, is really going to matter. Indiana has done, other than just simply winning the games it should win, Indiana's done all the things it needs to do to position itself to be back in the playoff again next year. The question is, and this is very open-ended, but I pose it to you before we kind of close by talking about UCLA. What are the next steps for this team in your mind? Because obviously, you're not nothing's going to dramatically change, but teams do evolve as seasons go along. We talk about, for example, Fernando Mendoza and feeling like, hey, that's the Fernando Mendoza who's playing without thinking, who just looks natural and comfortable and instinctive. Everything's easy. What are some other next steps, do you think, for this team, especially, as we get to a point in the schedule where maybe Indiana can pad some stats, have some success, sort of feel good about itself, and maybe grow from that?
It's hard to find, because the worry is, right, and Kurt Cignetti loves going trap game with the quotes, that not taking any of the competition they have upcoming seriously because they're all in the midst of pretty significant struggles. Penn State, Wisconsin, most notably. UCLA is probably the exception, as he kind of said today, jokingly, although I don't think he was joking, that they're an undefeated team, having won 3-0 since a coaching change.
I think he absolutely thinks that way.
He's just not watching those first 4 games even at all. But not taking them seriously, looking ahead, because, look, I think you can see the road to the Big Ten title game. You could see a road to the bye in the college football playoff. We've talked about Joe kind of covering the Cotton Bowl. Like, that's what's on deck, right? And so to sleep on one of these teams that, could try to have some sort of motivation to try to win one for their, interim coach or something like that. But, look, they've never fallen in that trap since Cignetti's been here, and there were a lot of these type of games going to Northwestern on the road in a temporary stadium.
Michigan State last weekend.
Michigan State last year was kind of a bigger road game where they had actually a decent crowd for the first 15 minutes.
It was right before Michigan and Ohio State, so it was a natural sort of letdown moment.
But Cignetti's really good about sort of pushing the right buttons. Elijah Surratt said it got pretty gritty on Thursday when he wasn't sort of happy with kind of what was going on. And so,
I have a question for you guys.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's a two-parter. The 6 remaining, or is it 6 or 5 remaining games?
Five remaining games.
Who do you think poses the biggest threat, just in terms of maybe slipping through the week and looking ahead, or getting complacent?
You first.
I think the biggest just challenge, which is funny because I said at the start of the year, and then it looked like it was a completely wrong answer, and now it's back again. UCLA. I mean, just the way that they're playing, the way that staff sort of rejuvenated. Like, the offense looked dead, and now, I know Nico, there's some concerns about his leg injury.
Yeah, I think so.
But if he plays, Kurt Cignetti talked about, I think they're running over 230 yards per game. They've found the pulse, and they're playing really well, and they've got nothing to sort of lose. Like, that's the game that you're kind of worried about. Penn State still has to go to Ohio State. They're going to be a demoralized bunch. Wisconsin, I think, has another tough game before they face them.
Wisconsin, you can't make an argument for me with Wisconsin right now. You really need to go find the last 27 drive street was so brutal.
And no cheese curds. Maryland is interesting because they got the freshman quarterback that's sort of, he's going to make improvements as he gains more experience. That's not a team under Mike Loxley that's played well in tough games or played well in when the game's on the line in the fourth quarter.
Played well deep into seasons. That's always kind of been a criticism, and it's starting to manifest itself again.
That's sort of the drawback for them. So I think UCLA is my answer. I don't know if you have anything different.
So the question was, what's the biggest sort of threat left on the schedule? Indiana's 7-0, obviously trying to get to 12-0, which would punch their ticket to the Big Ten championship game. It is still hard for me to look past Penn State. It's hard for me to look past Beaver Stadium. And it's hard for me to look past, we've talked about this on the podcast this year, that's still a program that is recruiting at an NFL athletic level. And you're still going to be talking about players. And yes, some of them will be demoralized. Some will probably, in fairness, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bump you there. Some of them will probably be trying to put something on film to go in the portal. I know they're without Drew Aller for the rest of the season. And they do play Ohio State, I believe, the week before. So, it's, they could be really beat up as well as just kind of.
And the counter argument, I think, to that, though, is that Indiana and players in general are always, they've not won at Happy. Like they've not won it.
No, they've never won at Penn
That's
State.
a game that you're not going to sleep through because like you could put. That's a mark for the whole, your history in the program, right?
Yeah.
That's a banner that you can hang on your resume. But like,
I'll let you bring that up with Kurt Signetti.
it was more a reference to our name of the podcast, not a real banner.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you tell Kurt Signetti he should hang a banner for beating Penn
He
State.
should. It's a metaphorical banner. Well, but the idea is like that's a huge. That's a testament to where you've come as a program to sort of win there that you've never done before, and so I think that's the sort of like why you wouldn't play down there as opposed to one of the lesser teams, because they are going to be in a bad spot.
You think they're going to be overlooking another undefeated team this weekend?
Oh, Indiana.
I mean, UCLA is 3-0 according to Kurt Signetti. Yeah, Penn State would be my answer. A natural.
So you're overlooking
a natural turn to UCLA though. Nico Iamaleava, you mentioned, is I think tonight. We're talking on Monday. I think Tim Skipper said they'll know something more either tonight or tomorrow. Like basically today's UCLA's treatment day if you're injured. But I mean he has gone up a level, and the passing talent, the arm talent was always there. He's averaging almost 5 yards a carry. Only DeMond Williams among quarterbacks has more rushing yards in the Big Ten. And I don't know if you watched that Penn State game, I saw a lot of the second half. Like he ate Penn State's defense up with his legs. And Kurt Signetti mentioned what did he say about him today? He said something like he's got like a quick body or something like that. It's clear that he's worried about Iamaleava's.
He's got a live body, a really quick body.
Yeah.
That's why you've seen some of the long games out of the pocket with him.
He's clearly worried about the dual threat there. Of course, if he's injured, maybe that's limited. But I think the other thing you said about UCLA that if the answer is UCLA, who's the greatest threat to Indiana, it's that they don't really have anything to lose. Now, maybe it starts to get real for them this weekend. Like they're 3-4. I mean. Like
they're 3-1 in the conference, though.
Yeah, and bowl eligibility is
absolutely
a very reasonable target at this point. I don't know what their full schedule is from here, but bowl eligibility is absolutely a reasonable. So at Indiana, Nebraska, at Ohio State, Washington, at USC. So I mean, maybe I would say probably not likely, but maybe they are a team that has nothing to lose. On the other hand, they have not faced a team like Indiana. That's the other part of it. Like they played Penn State, but they played them at home, and they obviously played a Penn State team that we did not realize how damaged.
You're giving UCLA a home field advantage?
Well, I'm certainly not giving Penn State much credit given how damaged it turned out their psyche was.
They had flight troubles.
They had flight. Well, no, they didn't have flight troubles. They didn't have a long enough runway in State College. I mean, this is the best team UCLA will have seen. Obviously, the travel's kind of on the other foot now. And in fact, I think this is their second road game in 3 weeks. So like they're, if you wonder if they're a little bit worn down, I understand why you are nervous about UCLA.
I'm not nervous. I'm just saying that
I think you're very nervous.
Toughest game on the schedule.
You're very nervous. I think Bill Connolly had it at 40-13.
Yes, he did.
So, he's not nervous.
Yeah, absolutely.
If all goes according to plan and you make it 12-0 to the Big Ten title, what kind of threat do you think the defense in the front seven in particular poses against Ohio State? A team that obviously just beat the hell out of Wisconsin last weekend and has been doing it all season. How do you think they've because we saw it against Oregon where we dominated them up front. You figure it might be a little bit similar, or at least they'd be close, but it still kind of worries me. What do you think?
Yeah, so the question is how would Indiana match up in the front seven defensively with Ohio State? I think it's tough to say because Ohio State's putting up a lot of numbers, but Ohio State hasn't seen a team like Indiana this season. And Ohio State obviously has two incredibly talented wide receivers. The question I think you would have is, and maybe we get a little bit of a look at this with Michigan, I'm not really sure, what Julian Sayin does if Indiana can generate some pressure. On the other hand, as we talked about earlier, if Indiana is, Indiana's not too many injuries away from suddenly that front seven looking a little bit more ordinary. There's not really a natural replacement if any of those three linebackers gets hurt either, and they're a big, big part of what
They can
what
scheme it
Indiana
and just
does.
go back to more 4-2-5, but I get your point.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know, they lose a
they are
fundamental part of
better,
their
I
defense.
think,
Yeah.
when those three are on the field
Yes,
together,
yeah.
Hardy, Fisher, and Jones. I don't know if you've really thought too much about that matchup. Admittedly, I have not.
I just was looking at the numbers the other day in terms of Ohio State. Like, they've only allowed 4 touchdowns all season. So, I mean, like, that's pretty incredible. Like, and Indiana's right there. Indiana's only allowed 7. Oklahoma's 2. But so, I mean, when you're talking about, like, it goes back to the offensive line, because the offensive line for Indiana had shaky moments against Iowa and Oregon, and that sort of stood out more than any kind of the defense. Like, look, the defense at Iowa was on point. The defense against Oregon was on point the entire time. So to me, it's more the offensive line. It's sort of flipped. Like, will Ohio State's front seven sort of dictate the game the way they did sort of last year in Columbus? In a neutral site, maybe it's different. Like that, because the noise was such a huge issue that it sort of threw everything off because they were reading the snap count or kind of jumping off of it. And so that's what it is to me. I really believe in this defense. Like, we've talked about this kind of all season, that I think even as good as Mendoza's doing right now, like, I think the defense is the clear story, that they're just so good and have been all year. Obviously, the first quarter wasn't great against Michigan State, but I think it's a really good group. And so I'd be surprised if they struggled, but I wouldn't be necessarily surprised if Ohio State forced Indiana's offensive line to have sort of some issues that came up last year. I think Hooperazzi has a question too.
What?
Thanks, man. Hey.
Yes.
And the 1987
Appreciate it.
poster has September 26th we played Missouri, and it was Pork Day. I want to know if Indiana could possibly bring back
Pork Day, September 26th, 1987 was.
It was Pork Day at
What do we think that entailed?
Slaughtering a pig at halftime.
I mean, maybe like an open pit roast.
Like, it's just going on in the background.
I mean, that would be. It was probably the best smelling IU football game in history, I would
Well,
guess.
Zach, you'll make that request up the chain?
I mean, I would happily smoke a pork butt in the press box. It would be substantially better than what they feed us.
It'd also probably be a fire hazard. Probably bring the whole press box down.
I don't think I'm not sure that would be a problem for some people in Indiana. I think
Chris
they would
Cincinnati
love.
be there.
I think they would love a reason to.
Chris
have
Cincinnati
to-
is ready to rip that thing down. I think.
Yeah, I think. Well, and if it burned down, then obviously the insurance money would just.
Now if it does, you're going to be in trouble.
Now we're getting in trouble. The other thing I would say to the question about Ohio State is Julian Sayin, which is, he has been very good, and I think as we're saying, he's been better lately. He was outstanding against obviously a bad Wisconsin team, but he was also 23-27 for 326 yards and 3 touchdowns against a pretty good Minnesota defense, or at least a decent Minnesota defense. But there's been a feeling at times, and this is probably true earlier in the year, that they were not trying to ask him to do too much. That they were trying to keep things simple for him. Obviously, he's very young. I think he's a redshirt sophomore, maybe a true sophomore. What happens if, Dante Moore had not seen a pass rush like that, and I don't think it's unfair to say he wilted against it as that game wore on. What happens if Sayin has only taken 3 sacks all year. He's taken 1 sack in 3 different games: Ohio, Washington, and Wisconsin. What happens if Indiana can generate that pressure against him at a level that he doesn't? Because again, if you look at Ohio State's schedule from this point forward, they are not going to. So I guess they're off this week, I believe, and then Ohio State, and then Penn State. At Purdue, UCLA, Rutgers, they're probably not going to see a really good defense again until they get to Michigan. So, although, who knows what Penn State does? It's Jim Knowles going back to Columbus. Maybe there's something there. I think that's the question I would have on Ohio State's side is how does he handle a level of pressure that maybe he's not going to see against anyone else this season? Certainly not unless Penn State's got something up its sleeve, certainly not until Michigan. I don't have my season prediction in front of me. Do we? We always close with these, right? We always close with. But
let's go.
One more from Hooperazzi while we're.
Zach wrote about them.
I wrote about volleyball won against Ohio State. Still just the one loss in conference play in the top 16 when the NCAA released it. The NCAA does this for some lesser sports, of course. Every once in a while they do it for basketball too, where they release like our top 16 as things stand today. That was late last week, and that's important because top 16 host. It's like women's basketball. The top 16 host, and I'm sure Indiana would gladly submit to host. Lost the Purdue game, suffered a pretty important injury in that game. But here's what number one, listen, in every sport you got to find some depth. Number two, it's sort of like Indiana football right now. The quality's there. They've got a lot of the quality they need. They had a top 10 RPI before that Purdue match. The RPI is not going to suffer in conference play. You need to pick up some wins. That's just more. It's more quantity now, and you can grab. I think they have Minnesota next. That would be again. That's just that is a brick in the resume, and that's pretty much where that program is at this point. Men's soccer. A couple of big ones coming up, Wisconsin, and then at Maryland, I think Friday night, if I'm not mistaken. And if they want back in, again, a program that from an NCAA tournament perspective, top 10 in the RPI when it was released last week, no real concerns about making the tournament, no real concerns about being in a position to host in the tournament. But if they want back in that Big Ten title race, they probably need all 3 points at Maryland. Because Maryland's kind of been setting the pace, whereas Indiana has obviously had a couple of stumbles in conference. But, yeah. So, thank you, Hoop, for shouting up those. Question here.
What is it like for you two as reporters to be in the center of such a huge sports story? Signetti and the football.
So you want to take – what's it like to be –
When you came here, they weren't very good, and they've gotten so much better.
What's it like in
Well, for years they had Zach Osterman holding them down.
That's
holding
true.
The football team down.
Constantly predicting they go 12-0.
And doom and gloom. It's fascinating just because it's such a unique story. I mean, there's really not a lot of comparisons to it. Signetti.
No.
I think Scott Dolson described Kurt Signetti as a unicorn. It's kind of apt. Just what
I think the time is. I mean, the other part of it. We've talked about this on podcast. This is a construct of the time we're in college sports too. You would not have been able to affect this kind of turnaround.
Don't sell Kurt Signetti that he wouldn't have been able to do this.
Well, he wouldn't have been able to bring in 40 whatever transfers.
He would have made it work.
Would have changed
No, but
the rules.
I think he's a unique personality. I think the uniqueness of the story in terms of what the turnaround, the speed at the turnaround, and I think I've heard a lot of analysts and administrator kind of like talked about he's changed the game because he's kind of changed it. So like, who has an excuse now, right, to come in and say they can't win a national title in year 1 or 2? I just find it fascinating and just very unique. Just because, like I said, I don't think that anybody's ever kind of seen anything like this.
I'll also just freely admit, like when I wanted to be a sports writer as a kid, I was growing up in the South. Like, this is what I wanted to write about. Not that I don't enjoy covering college basketball, but like I grew up watching high level college football and thinking like that's what I'm going to cover someday.
But to his point though, nothing, because like even basketball locally, if the basketball team wins a type of championship, that's going to be huge and be all sorts of fan support. Nothing is like a football team winning a national championship nationally.
No,
and what
yeah,
the amount of attention football gets over basketball at a wide. I mean, you go across the country, you can see it. Certainly in the SEC. I've covered football in the SEC. Football is just.
Do you think the SEC has heard of Indiana? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's been discussed on any SEC centric shows.
But I just think it just speaks to like the idea that football is different, and so like when you get on this stage, it's just a lot. It's unique.
All right, so here's I'm looking back at my season predictions. This is brutal. It starts with Tino Sunseri's homecoming might not be so pleasant on the visiting sideline. It's no longer Tino Sunseri's homecoming.
Tino who?
Yeah. I also mentioned Deshaun Foster.
I did too.
They are both gone. I had Indiana 35, UCLA 17. For completely different reasons now. That sounds about right to me. Where are you at?
I had Indiana 35, UCLA 27. I probably think it's more of a 2-possession game. I could see this being close though, with the way if Nico's healthy. That's the caveat. If he's healthy and able to run the ball, this feels like a game that could just get ugly because he can just, create by himself and sort of break down a defensive game plan that you wouldn't have against a different talent at quarterback. I still think Indiana wins by 2 possessions probably now. But I could see UCLA making it a game longer than Michigan State even did.
You're not going to pronounce his last name?
No.
Okay. Well, then I guess we have to wrap this up.
I think
then.
Nico works.
We'll do one more giveaway, but we're going to do it after we close down the podcast.
Okay. But does anybody have any more questions?
Any more questions, anything?
The other question was,
Absolutely.
One last question.
how do you compare Signetti and Bob Knight? I mean, do you think they're kind of similar, and that's why they're both being successful? Or
So-
do you think they're very
Well,
So the question
Yeah,
is how would you compare Kurt Signetti and Bob Knight? Obviously, neither of us covered Bob Knight. But
I think it goes back to the comparisons to Nick Saban and a lot of these other sort of successful coaches. They're maniacal in their sort of focus and their sort of attention to details, and they all are just driven to a certain extent, to a crazy extent, by winning and success. But no, I mean, it's you see. I think that's the through line that I see with covering different coaches like that, and everybody kind of traces it back to Saban for Signetti specifically because obviously they were on the same staff and. There's that, but I think that's the kind of the through line for me that you're just going to have that extra it factor to a certain extent by that maniacal sort of focus and dedication.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I can only speak to Knight through the way he's been described to me by others. I think that one of the things that marks out a lot of coaches at their level is not just their attention to detail, but their ability to drill that detail into their teams, because it's very difficult to get 19, 20, 21-year-olds to stay as focused as certainly Kurt Signetti's teams do. And, anyone who would talk to you about Knight's teams, they were the same way. Obviously, I think Signetti, I think he's a tough coach. I don't, my sense he doesn't have maybe quite the fiery reputation that Knight
that's probably
had.
the difference because he does not like to use every practice minute.
Right. I mean, if anything, Signetti is much more about like efficiency and streamlining, and you don't hear stories from players about, he put us through a brutal 2.5-hour practice today.
And like when you're out of the building, he doesn't really want you worrying. Like he wants his coaches to take time with their like it's not. They can put in extra work, but like he does give them time.
There is another comparison, and the personalities in some ways reflect each other and in some ways don't, is Steve Spurrier. Spurrier was very much that way in terms of, I think someone asked Spurrier why he golfed so much in season, and he just said, well, this is what works for me. Like this is, I need that disconnect. I need that moment to unplug. And there are coaches that are better when they're there 16 hours a day. But I think Signetti is a coach that recognizes my process for both me and for the people that I need to be productive and be successful around me is better if, we are, when we're on, and we maximize every minute that we're there. We no stone unturned, no detail too small. And then when we're off, we respect that too. So.
Well, the other comparison I would be the X's and O's part of it.
Yeah,
Signetti,
sure.
That is very his offensive system is what they've used throughout his career. The film kind of part of the film is his ability to incorporate ideas and things into his game. Like he steals from that, but like sees what like he likes and then incorporates it and makes it work. Like there was Knight built his offensive system and built all that, and like I think you probably see some comparisons there that Signetti's just a very good coach in terms of X's and O's too.
Right. I mean, it is also just understanding how to be 2 moves ahead. In terms of how to be, just steadily sort of adjusting before the next adjustment comes, recognizing what's going to be necessary before it even arrives, having contingency plans, just things like that, just little things, little stuff that most people don't see, essentially, that they do. So
Thank you for the question.
I think this has been fun.
Yeah, it's been good.
Yeah. I got a little sunburn on my neck. But I'm fine.
You're heating up. You're cooked.
No, I'm Irish. I'm used to getting sunburn. It's pretty much a daily occurrence for me. He's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman. We're gonna have one more giveaway once we kind of close down the podcast here. But for the Indianapolis Star and the Bloomington Herald Times, thank you so much to Homefield Apparel for hosting us here at Homefield at Tracks in downtown Bloomington at Kirkwood Avenue. Thank you so much, everyone who came out for the podcast today. We'll try to do it again at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Ready.
And please, as ever, please remember to check out IndyStar.com, HeraldTimesOnline.com, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we will talk to you soon.